Hey everybody, Dave here with another Pathfinder rule reminder for you, and today what I would like to do is just take a couple minutes to address a number of the questions and concerns that pop up on the comments of my videos and other places online with regards to the crafting system in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Before I get into this, I do want to say that I am not here to either defend the crafting system or to tear it down. What I would like to do instead is take a look at a number of these items that pop up frequently and just kind of give what my take is on them and perhaps what I think the intent of the rules are. Obviously, I'm not one of the designers. I can't speak for them, but maybe I can give you what I think they are going for when they design these systems, and also say, you know what, if this concern that's being addressed is not something that fits well into the crafting system, how would I handle it in my games if one of my players brought up the same concern? So before we get too deep into this, I do want to talk a little bit about what I believe the crafting system is intended for. There's really only two situations where I believe the crafting system is intended. And the first of those is to allow players to craft items that they find while adventuring. When they find a formula and they want to go home and they want to craft the item from that formula, is another way to give them treasure and rewards. And second, I believe the system was designed to allow players another way to move their Pathfinder story forward. And this is going to be very tricky because the stories being told at my table are going to be very different from the stories being told at your table. And obviously the designers can't, predict, every situation that every table is going to have. But I think that they have a vision for what the vibe of a Pathfinder story should be and what commonalities they can expect between all the different games and cater to those commonalities. And so when I think about trying to define what a quote Pathfinder story is, I go to the introduction of the core rulebook where it says, Pathfinder is a fantasy tabletop role-playing game where you and a group of friends gather to tell a tale of brave heroes and cunning villains in a world filled with terrifying monsters and amazing treasures. So when they created this system for crafting, what they were trying to do was have a solution that would allow brave heroes to create and craft some of the gear that they would need to vanquish cunning villains. They were not coming to this from the perspective of this is going to be a role-playing game that focuses on merchants and tradespeople and shopkeepers and a fortune-building economic simulator. Even though there could be elements of that go into your games, and you certainly could have players and characters who have a background in those areas, that's not the story that the designers of Pathfinder were trying to tell with the rule systems they created. So again, two areas where I believe the crafting rules are intended to work. To craft the formulas that you find when you're adventuring and to move a Pathfinder story forward. If what you want to accomplish within the narrative does not meet either of those two items, then don't use the crafting system. I'm not saying don't do those things. Just don't use the crafting system because the crafting system was not intended for those items. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive in to the different questions and concerns that have been addressed recently. The first one is a concern that I have seen voiced frequently, especially from the detractors of this system, and that is that it takes 4 days to make a simple dagger that is only worth 2 silver pieces. Okay, so I have a couple of thoughts about this one, and really the complaint is it takes 4 days. Well, if you're using complex crafting, it could take you 6 days to make that dagger that's only worth 2 silver pieces. I feel like this is very much a theoretical complaint, a theoretical concern. I don't believe that there are many players out there who are actually trying to use the system to make simple daggers. But I do understand the point that's trying to be made with the concern about crafting daggers. I just don't feel like it is a applicable concern. It's not something that people are actually trying to do. I think this comes up a lot because it's an inexpensive item, and also a lot of people have played Skyrim where they craft 300 daggers, iron daggers, at the very beginning of the game in one day to try to level up. But with all that said, let's apply the two criteria I have for using the crafting system. Did this person find a formula for a common dagger while adventuring and they're now trying to craft it? It's theoretically possible that that could happen. I think it's highly unlikely, so we'll rule that one out. The second is, does the act of crafting a simple, mundane dagger move a heroic story forward? There might be some fringe cases where that could be a possibility, but I'm going to say nah, probably isn't going to be likely. So how would I handle this in my game? If I had a player who came to me and said, Dave, my character is an apprentice blacksmith, first level. We've got one day of downtime. I think I want to show that he's really practicing his art, and he wants to craft a special dagger that's going to be his own personal dagger. Or maybe he's even a dwarven character. Maybe this is his clan dagger that he wants to craft. The way I would handle that in my game is I would say, fantastic. You spend your daytime working and you made yourself a dagger. I wouldn't engage in the full crafting system for something that is narratively minor and mechanically minor. The existence of a simple dagger is not going to have any impact at all in a game. So I wouldn't even engage with the crafting system. So let's move on to the second concern that's often addressed, which is the crafting system is broken because you cannot make any money with it. And there's a couple of different ways to approach this, but when I see this concern addressed, it really falls into kind of two categories. The first category is the system is broken because not only could my adventurer not make any money with the system, but nobody can make any money with the system. And we know that that's not true because there are blacksmiths and armor smiths and stone cutters and all kinds of other tradespeople who, within the narrative, make their living plying their trade. But there's no realistic way to make money in this system. So how are they feeding their families? How are they paying for their shops? And the second area where I see this come up is when people say, like, I want my character to generate money by crafting. If my character is an expert master crafter, I want them to be able to generate money by selling the things that they make. So again, let's take a look at each of those points in turn and compare them to the two reasons why I believe the crafting system exists and when you should engage in the crafting system. So first off, tradespeople could not possibly make a living using these crafting rules. Does that involve crafting an item that was found as treasure? No. Does that move the Pathfinder story forward? Probably not. Like, within the narrative, we know these people exist. We know that somehow they're making money, they're feeding their families, but the crafting system wouldn't be the system that allows that. But again, because that concern doesn't interact with the two reasons to use the crafting system, I don't think we would use the crafting system to explain how tradespeople can make a living. Instead, like, my belief is there's an archetype out there called tradesperson that's so far unpublished. And it's not available to people with heroic levels or people who are actively adventuring, so they wouldn't be active PCs in a game. It's limited to NPCs. But somewhere in the rules of that tradesperson archetype are special feats that allow them to manage crafting in such a way that they can generate a living. It's just that those stories with those characters, whatever story would have that tradesperson as a protagonist, those stories exist. But would those be the Pathfinder stories of a heroic and brave adventurer heroes who are defeating cunning villains? No, it would be a more domestic story. and therefore is not what the designers of the system were intending when they created the crafting system. And then the second area would be those players who want to generate more income by using their crafting skills. Now, again, my take on this is that the designers of the game intend that an adventuring, brave hero to generate the majority of their income through the act of being a brave adventuring hero. The majority of their income should be coming from the treasures that they find, the rewards they receive for completing quests, and those sorts of things. So they really didn't design a system to cater towards using your crafting skills strictly to generate income. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't have players who say, "Hey, Dave, I want to play a heroic merchant. Like, why can't I play a merchant who's heroic and who's adventuring and wants to generate money, or to be a heroic blacksmith, or if I invest in all of this to create, to be able to create and craft items, I want to be able to sell those items for a reasonable amount of money." I think those are all valid character concepts. I think they definitely have their place in a narrative of a game, but I don't believe those really fall into the the prototypical brave adventuring hero scope that the designers had when they created this system. So again, if it doesn't meet my first two criteria, then I say that's a great concept, but let's find a way to accommodate that without using the crafting system, because that's not what the crafting system is for. So first off, if you just want to generate income by using your crafting skill, then I would just call that an earn income activity and treat earn income like any other earn income activity, except you're using your crafting skill, or if you have an appropriate lore skill, use that appropriate lore skill as well. And if you're fifth level and you're expert, you're generating 1 gold piece of profit every day that you ply your trade as a smith. And within the narrative, you can say that you work all week, and then at the end of the week you sell the sword that you made it and you turn a 7 gold piece profit. You don't have to micromanage and track every single individual item you craft. You just say, I work this many days, you pass the skill check, 5th level, expert, that's 1 gold per day, and that's the amount of money that you generated from the act of plying your trade. Now for that concept of the adventuring merchant, if I had a player who came to me and said, Dave, I really want to play an adventuring merchant. They're a merchant, they're going from town to town, they're a business person, but they're also a bard, or they're also a rogue or what have you, and they're adventuring with the party, but the crafting system doesn't really fit that. And the way we would handle that is just say, if you're traveling from town to town, you're a merchant, you're buying trade goods in one community, and hopefully you're buying them for as low a cost as possible, and then you're selling them in the next community for as high a value as possible. Then we would just apply the earn income activity to the acts of buying and selling. So say this character, for simple math, they're 5th level, they have expert proficiency in merchant lore, then 1 day of downtime work is going to be worth 1 gold. So if they say that they're in a community and they're buying trade goods, they spend 4 days working. So that's worth 4 gold per the income earned table. What they would do is at the end of that, they would mark on their character sheet, I have 20 gold worth of trade goods, but they would only spend 16 gold in order to buy them. And the 4 gold discount that comes from that income earned table would represent haggling, negotiating, doing research to find a seller who is overstocked, and so on. Wouldn't need to track exactly what the trade goods are unless you really want to. I would just have like one commodity on the character sheet that's called trade goods and say they're worth 20 gold, even though this character only spent 16 gold because he spent 4 days of effort getting the lowest price possible. Then when they go to the next community, let's say it's also a 5th level settlement, then they're going to ply their trade and try to sell those trade goods. Say they spend 4 more days of downtime trying to find the best buyer, finding someone who's in greater demand for these goods, haggling the price, all of that. Then they're going to earn an additional 1 gold per day, and that's going to mean that when they sell that 20 gold worth of trade goods, they're going to sell it for 24 gold, meaning that they generated a profit of 8 gold. But again, I wouldn't get into the crafting system for this. I want to get into forging the items that they're creating. I want to get into tracking what the items are. I would just use the earn income activity, use that income earned table, and make the goods generic, just trade goods commodity and make life simple and move on. That's the way I would handle it in my game. And the third concern that I often see voiced is you'd just be better off buying it. And I agree wholeheartedly. In a lot of cases, you would just be better off buying the item, but I don't see that as a negative at all. I think, again, the system is designed for crafting formulas that you find while adventuring and for moving a heroic Pathfinder story forward. And in most of the cases where you see this, you'd be better off buying it. That certainly implies that whatever you're trying to craft is readily available on a store shelf to go buy. And yeah, if it's readily available on a store shelf for you to go buy, then go buy it. In the real world, we have master craftsmen, and I don't think that they labor and hand forge a shovel. They just go down to Home Depot and they buy a shovel. And yeah, I understand that we live in an industrialized society and there's certain benefits to that, but I think my point still remains. The crafting system is not intended for crafting things that you could easily go purchase. It's for crafting things that you can't purchase. It's for crafting things that you find by a formula, and for uncommon rarity things, for rarity items, and for extravagant, unique items that forging, creating, having moves the Pathfinder story forward. If it's something mundane that's on the store shelf, just go buy it. I think that's appropriate. The fourth concern is that crafting is cost prohibitive from a mechanic standpoint. And give me a second, this one's a little longer, so I'm going to read it verbatim. They say, you have to dedicate a lot of player resources in the form of feats and skill increases. And since crafting is based on intelligence, if that is not your key attribute, then you need to invest there too. You simply do not get enough benefit from crafting for all that you have to invest into it. And I don't disagree with that at all. It does seem like it is a pretty heavy commitment. So my advice to GMs out there is make sure you're rewarding players who do invest heavily into the crafting system. If you have a player who's really going all in on crafting, make sure you are providing formulas as rewards. Make sure you're giving a generous amount of downtime so that they can craft and get satisfaction for all they're investing into it. Try to create situations where crafting skills are of a benefit. They're going to be repairing shields. They're going to be etching runes into their party's weapons. But could they also be involved in helping fortify the defenses of a castle or something more grand that ties tighter into the story? Anytime any player invests that much into any one thing, as a GM, you're going to want to make that player feel like they're getting a proper return on their investment. So I don't disagree at all that there is this concern that you really have to invest a lot to get the most out of the crafting system. My advice is not to change the system so much as just make sure that you are catering to the strengths and interests of all your players, but especially that player who has invested a lot into the crafting system. The fifth concern here is a response to my most recent video where I did an example where Bruno the dwarf crafted a magical spell guard shield. I'll make sure I leave a link to that in the description of this video. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. But here it says crafting is a bad deal because in that example that I did, Bruna spent 14 days of work to only save 50 gold and still had to spend 200 gold out of her pocket. So a Spellguard shield has a value of 250 gold pieces. In my example, Bruna the dwarf spent 2 weeks, 14 days to forge one, and after all of her work and skill checks and rushing the whole project, she saved 50 gold and still had to pay 200 gold. So all that effort equaled what she got a 20% reduction in the cost of the shield, and I see where this is coming from. If you view that, if you think of yourself as I'm a craftsperson, I'm the one making the thing. Like I shouldn't have to invest that much in materials. It should be more if I'm making a thing, it should be mostly about me and my talents. In that specific example, I think 75 gold pieces actually went to her paying assistants and a magician or a wizard to help enchant the shield. So, because she didn't spend the entire time to craft it, she had to rush and spend a little extra money at the end. But I do see that concern. I do see that concern of it doesn't feel like you're getting much benefit at the end of crafting it. But what I would say is let's compare crafting to other earn income activities. So for consistency, we're going to say there's a 7th level task, an earn income activity. 7th level expert is going to generate 2.5 gold per day. If someone was doing earn income over the same amount of time that Bruna was making that shield, they would earn 35 gold pieces. So earn income, same level, same proficiency, would earn 35 gold versus the 50 gold value that Bruna got out of the same amount of time. And one thing to keep in mind is when you're crafting, you use the crafter's level as the task level, regardless of where they are crafting. But when you do an earn income activity, the task level is usually roughly the same level as the settlement you're in because it's based on how much money customers might have to pay for your services. So if we wanted to really look at this value, let's say Bruna was in a level 1 settlement. She still would have saved 50 gold through crafting that shield over 14 days. But if it was a level 1 settlement, she would have earned less than 3 gold over those 2 weeks. So less than 3 gold versus 50 gold. I do recognize the concern here that it doesn't feel like you're getting a lot of value out of it when you end up still having to take 200 gold out of your pocket to make the shield. But relative to other methods of earning income, crafting really isn't that bad. And this actually goes back to what I was sharing before about concerns that I just can't make money crafting. Well, if Bruna had a buyer lined up that was able to buy this shield on the spot, she would have generated more money than she would from the earn income activity. And a lot of that is by being able to rush and get double your benefit for every day after setup. So yes, that is another concern that frequently comes up, but I don't think it's quite as bad as some people may think it is when you compare crafting to other ways of generating income with your downtime. And the 6th concern reads, it doesn't make sense to tie the value of the finished item to the formula's listed price. With this system, all longswords that have ever been crafted are of the same quality and have the same value. What if I want to impress a king by crafting a truly exceptional sword? I can't, because they're all only worth 1 gold no matter how skilled the crafter is. And I agree with that assessment, definitely by raw. The system doesn't allow for that, and I think crafting a sword to impress a king definitely kind of falls into that area of wanting to craft something to move a Pathfinder story forward. So let's talk a little bit about this one. Um, the crafting system is all based on formulas. So I guess theoretically there could be a formula that is to create a spectacular 50 gold piece value longsword. And if you had that formula, you could then go through the regular crafting system in order to make it. And at the end of the day, you would have mechanically a regular longsword, but it'd be worth 50 gold because that's what the formula said, but also to represent the absolutely exceptional craftsmanship that went into creating a 50 gold piece longsword. But such a formula, as I am aware, does not exist. Now, this could be an area where you could, by raw, use the inventor feat to create such a formula for such an item. But this is where I fall back on that previous concern about things feeling cost prohibitive with how much you have to invest. If I had a player who wanted to, who was like a master, a master in crafting, and they wanted to forge a spectacular longsword to give as a gift to a king, I wouldn't want to say, well, you're going to have to wait until you get the inventor feat because you haven't taken that one yet before you could do that. So even though by raw this doesn't work, this is where I fall into house rule territory, especially crafting rules that I shared in a previous video that dealt with art and crafting art. And the general idea is that you would be able to craft a work of art without a formula, but using largely the same system, and you wouldn't have to use the crafting skill to craft art. You could use an appropriate lore skill. You could, in this case, you might use weaponsmithing lore, or if you were a painter, you could use art lore, or if you were a bard and you wanted to compose your master symphony, you could do so by using the like a performance or music lore to do so. But the system would still work. You would still use the crafting system, but the one key difference that, I guess two key differences that I would encourage: first, you wouldn't need to use a formula in order to craft a work of art. You could just say that I'm working towards a particular gold piece value to represent the quality of the work of art that I'm creating. And or you could say that after the crafting process finishes, you can continue on. So for this player who might want to create a very high quality longsword as a symbolic gift to their new liege, then you would start by making a normal longsword with a normal longsword formula. But when that is done, and you would normally be done crafting the longsword, you can continue spending additional downtime days afterwards, and instead of deducting from the balance that's left, you would be adding to the total value of the sword. So if you had expert crafting proficiency in your 10th level, that works out to 5 gold pieces per day of work. So if you spent more time working on that sword, every additional day would be increasing the value of that sword by 5 gold. And then once you get it to where you want after the 10 days or whatever, you would say that on your character sheet, I have a longsword that is valued at 50 gold, or whatever that gold piece value might be. And then that is what you gift to the king. Mechanically, it would still be a longsword. This wouldn't confer any additional bonuses, although a GM is perfectly within their right to do so. I just think by the system as normal, it wouldn't confer any mechanical benefits, but it would be considered not just a sword, but a true work of art. But in that case, where you're wanting to create a higher than normal quality item, then I wouldn't approach it the same way that I would approach crafting that normal item. I would start it with that, crafting that item. And then I would take it into kind of a house rule territory that I use for players who would want to create works of art and just allow them to work additional days to increase the value instead of decreasing the balance due. Once that balance due hits zero, every additional day working increases the value until you have that work of art that you want to give to the king. So those are my my ideas. Those are my takes on 6 of the most common concerns with the crafting system. Again, I agree the system is flawed. Anytime you have a system that generates this much conversation and generates this much controversy and has this many people saying that they don't like it, it's not a perfect system. It is flawed. But I think it's perhaps a system that can work, that is serviceable, especially if you start to recognize the situations in which it is intended for and the situations that it's not intended for. And if it's not intended for a certain situation, then don't try to shoehorn the crafting system into meeting those needs. There's other options available. If you have any questions, concerns, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of you out there who have a hot take on what I've said here, as always, make sure you leave those in the comments section. I'll leave in the description links to all of my other crafting videos that discuss this and other downtime activities. And as always, I want to take a quick moment to say thank you to everybody out there who supports me, whether that's by clicking the like button, subscribing to the channel, subscribing to the Patreon, buying a super thanks. I really appreciate everything you folks do to support me. And with that, thanks for watching. Take care and happy gaming.